Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and this is the second ever episode of Fact Checking, where I go over the FAQ entries from the latest set and just touch on all of those entries, what they're trying to say, what it means, whether it's clear or not, and what the rules are behind those entries to kind of help you better understand some of the cards that Hobby Japan has highlighted as being cards that they think, oh, we should probably explain a little bit more about this to make sure there's not any confusion. Um, Being that this is only the second time that I've done this, I'm going to just kind of go over again quickly, like what the FAQs are, like kind of how that comes about, and the presentation of how we're going to go over all of this. If you want to see the entries for any particular cards, there's timestamps for them in the description here, so you can just hop right to whichever one of the 40 entries, that's right, 40 different cards here to go over, that there are, or you can just sit back and enjoy the ride here throughout all of this in order. Just put your feet up on the desk or couch, I don't know, wherever you are. Car? Anyway. So the FAQs, it's important to understand here that the FAQs is kind of a silly idea, in the sense that what Hobby Japan / Square Enix does is that every time a new set comes out, basically right around when the set comes out, or I think it's usually around the pre-release time, they will put up these FAQ entries as a way to kind of highlight cards and effect that they want to give some clarification on. So of course FAQs normally stands for frequently asked questions, but it's really not the purpose that it serves here, because first off, they put these up before anybody has seen a lot of these cards, so there's not a chance to ask questions about them. And they never go back and add other ones that come up over the course of like a set being out or whatever. So it's less frequently asked questions and more, these are questions we think you're going to have, or these are cards we think you're going to screw up, I guess. So it's them highlighting certain cards in effect that they are just trying to anticipate are going to be questions people are going to have about these. So that's the purpose there. If you're watching this right around when it comes out, which is probably most of you that are watching this, you might be wondering, why are we doing this now? Like, we're about a month away from the next set, because this is the this is the fact-checking episode for Journey of Discovery, the set that's right there, that one, that box. You guys have opened those boxes a long time ago at this point. So you're like, why are we doing this now? A couple of reasons. One is around the holidays, and even before that, I was kind of on a bit of a break from making stuff, which that's my fault. So I didn't cover this right when it was released. That being said, Square Enix themselves didn't get around to posting this when they normally do. Like I said, normally it comes out around pre-release or maybe around the actual release of a set. They throw these up there and we have them just to use with the new cards. Now, my guess is that this time around, because the last set, well, this current set, I guess, but because Journey to Discovery, or Journey of Discovery, I always forget if it's to or of, Journey of Discovery, because it came out not that long after the Square Enix layoffs that happened, I have a feeling that there was some balls dropped in the fallout of that. And so as a result, even though the FAQs are available in Japanese on the Hobby Japan site, or not Hobby Japan, I guess it's still the Square Enix site, but the Japanese Square Enix site, they didn't show up on the English site for, I think, at least a month after the set came out, if not longer. I want to say it wasn't even until January that we got this in English. So part of it's my fault, but part of it's their fault, because I would have felt more pressure to do it when it came out, if it came out on time. But it was one of those things where it didn't come out until we were just kind of all wondering, well, eventually maybe we'll get this in English on the site. That would be cool. So I apologize for my part in this, but I am not solely to blame. But anyway, I figure we'll cover this because these cards could still be relevant. They're not all going away just because a new set's coming out in a month. And also the competitive season coming up. These cards could be important, or at least some of them could be important over the course of the competitive season. And it's also just a good way to learn more about rules stuff that you may not know already, even if the cards themselves don't end up having any relevance or you don't see them. Just, it's a vehicle with which to teach and learn about rules. So that's my whole setup there. Oh, I said I was gonna present things. So I will have the relevant card over here on this side for you to see in all of its glory, to read through all of it. And then beneath it here, I will have the FAQ entry itself from Square Enix / Hobby Japan. And I have I've color coded them. As you can see below, there's green, can't point the right way, green, yellow, and red. Somebody pointed out last time I did this, I guess this actually is the flag of some country. I don't remember what country it is. I'm not trying to make it that country's flag, but this is just showing 3 different colors. I designed it that way because to me there's 3 different tiers of FAQ entries in terms of how important they are, or kind of what the information is we're getting out of it. If it's a green one, that's basically, in my opinion, that's like a, we didn't really learn anything from this. This is a really basic rule that you probably should know already. And they're clarifying it, but they probably really didn't need to. And so I'm covering it just to be thorough, but like, we don't need to say too much about it. If it's yellow, then yellow entries are ones where I think there's something important to take away from that, and you should pay attention to, like, okay, what's going on here? What's the nuance? What's the kind of rules they're highlighting here? Because maybe it's something that's not as well known, or that people commonly make mistakes on, but it's still kind of within the purview of things that we've seen before. And then lastly, the red ones are the, oh, you better pay attention to what's going on here, because it's either that the card itself is really complicated, or that there's rules and wordings that are coming up in it that we've never seen before. And so now we're kind of learning new vocabulary, as it were, in the rules, or it's rules that people commonly screw up, like, that are because they are just not as well known, or because there's a lot of nuance to that rule, or it's just really deep in the weeds as far as the rules. So you can use that as kind of a guideline as you go through these. When you see a green one come up, we're probably not going to talk about the green one for too long. If it's a yellow one, there's going to be some important discussion on it that can kind of vary how long we have to talk about it. And then red means, like, buckle down, we're getting into it. Anyway, now that I've gone over all of that, let's get to it. We got 40 cards to go through, so let's get started. First off, we got Ifrit here. And Ifrit has 2 entries that says, first one says, it is not possible to pay the CP cost for Ifrit using the extra cost generated from discarding a card named Ifrit card. So let's look at what Ifrit says here and how that connects. So Ifrit has the first line here, 2 lines, I guess. First sentence is, if you cast Ifrit, you may remove 1 card named Ifrit in your break zone from the game as an extra cost. This is one of those common things that comes up when there's extra costs like this. People will be like, hey, I'm going to discard an Ifrit to pay the CP cost. Can I then remove that to pay this extra cost? The answer is to that's just a universal rule. The answer is no, because all costs are paid at the same time. So when you add an extra cost on, that's fine, but it's all being paid for at the same time. And at the time that you would be paying this cost to remove the Ifrit from your break zone from the game, you haven't yet paid the 1 CP in this case anyway by discarding 1. So at the time that you're paying, there is not currently, or at least that particular Ifrit is not currently in your break zone to remove as an extra cost. So they're just reiterating that here, which is that you can't double dip, basically. And the second entry says, the damage inflicted by the X burst is 5,000. It is not possible to remove a card named Ifrit card from the game. So interesting thing here is that we commonly, when we're discussing X bursts and teaching new players, we'll talk about how X bursts on a character is always just 1 auto ability. It's not necessarily the whole card, but it's 1 auto ability. If they have multiple abilities, we're only using 1 for the X burst. But with summons, we always say, oh yeah, the summon, it's the whole effect. The X burst is the whole effect on the card, which is usually true, but not 100% true. And this is one of those cases where it's not. You can see that the X burst text doesn't come in until that 3rd line there. And we have the lines above it, which means that the X burst here is only everything after the words X burst. And just as a formatting thing, doesn't matter if it's a summon, character, whatever, they always put any effects that have to do with the casting of the card, whether it's an extra cost, an alternate cost, something that reduces or adds to the cost. All that stuff always is the very first effect listed on the card. And so that's the case here. And so it helps to highlight the fact that the X burst is written down below, because they are separated. But it does mean that what they're saying here is that if you read the effect, it says choose one forward, deal 5,000 damage. If you paid the extra cost, deal it 8,000 damage instead. It might be obvious in this one that because with an X burst, you're not paying a cost. So you might be thinking, well, I didn't pay the extra cost, so it's only 5,000. But if somebody were to ask, like, hey, well, on the X burst, can I pay the extra cost? Like the CP cost, we're not doing that. But like, can I pay the extra cost? The answer there is no. So the X burst is only those last two lines, and we're not paying the cost anyway. So it's kind of a couple different reasons on this one. But even if it wasn't a cost related thing, you would ignore the bits above the X burst, even though it's a summon, even though we're used to thinking, oh, all the text on a summon is part of the X burst. It's not necessarily. It's most of the time, yes. There's very few summons that have this difference, but that's why it's worth pointing out. All right. Right away, we had a little warm up with Ifrit, and now we're into a red card. So, Chaos Advent. He's got a lot of text, and he's got a lot of entries here and what's going on. So, what I'm going to say before I dive into the FAQ entries is all you need to know about this to understand the entries is that he will, when his auto ability triggers, he will play a card, a forward onto the field, and it says the forward's element becomes dark and it gains job chaos. That's all we need to know. The rest of it's not important about what we reveal, what cards can be added. Just know that it's playing a forward to the field and that the forward's element becomes dark and it gains job chaos, and that those things don't end at the end of the turn. All right, understanding that, the first entry here on for him is a forward card played using this card's auto ability loses its original element and becomes a darkness element card. It does not have the darkness element added onto it. In case you didn't notice that while I was reading it, one of the other things I'm going to point out here about the this particular set of FAQ entries is the translating on it kind of awkward in a lot of places. There's a lot of strange wordings and sometimes incorrect wordings that they use, and I don't know how much of that's related to the Square Enix layoffs and maybe the fact that it was late, and maybe the QA on getting this translated accurately was not great. And so, with the exception of a couple of card names where I made sure the card name was correct here, I didn't alter their FAQ entries, so I just literally copy pasted it. And so for better or worse, we're going to see it the way that's written there, which is also important because if you go back and reference it later, then like I'm using what is on the website. So they wrote darkness element, and we know that darkness is not an element in the game. Dark is, but that's what they mean. So should be obvious, but it's just worth pointing out because we're going to see a bunch of these little awkward translations as we go through here. So anyway, it says that the forward played with this loses its original element and becomes dark element. This gets into some important vocabulary in FFTCG, which is the difference between the word becomes and the word gains. So when something says that it gains something, that's saying that it's not replacing anything on the card. It keeps all of its current attributes, and then you add that thing that it gained onto it. If an effect says becomes, then it's saying whatever it originally was, this original attribute, it is now becoming the new attribute instead of the old one. So because this says the forward element becomes dark, it's saying, oh, it was an earth card, but now it has become dark. It has lost that being earth and replaced that with being dark. Important distinction here. There are lots of monsters that can turn into forwards. And the exception is that their effects always say it also becomes a forward. So they get around it in that case by they couldn't just say it gains becoming a forward. That wouldn't work with the rules. But when they say also becomes, they're saying in addition to what it currently is. So again, weird vocabulary there, differences, but it's important to note for how this card works and just broadly. So the fact that it says becomes dark means that it loses its original element or elements, whatever it was before. Now, the second entry says a forward card played in this manner has both its original job and the job chaos. That goes back to what I was describing because the effect here says it gains job chaos. It doesn't say it becomes job chaos. It gains job chaos. So that means that if it was job black mage, now it's job black mage and job chaos. Okay, so we have kind of two different things that happen there. the element, it loses its original elements, becomes just dark, keeps its original jobs, gains a new one. Unless it was already job chaos, then I guess it's job chaos twice. Not really sure how that would work. But anyway, third entry. If a forward card is played using this card's auto ability while a light or darkness element character is already under the player's control, both are placed in the break zone. So they're saying that if you already control a light or a dark card and then you play something off of Chaos Advent's auto ability and it becomes dark, that they're all put into the break zone. And you might be thinking to yourself, doesn't it not allow me to play it to the field if I already control a light or a dark character? Wouldn't it just prevent that from happening? Normally, yes, but not the way that this is worded, because this, the way that the auto ability is worded, it plays the card onto the field first, and then it alters the card. So notice that it says play up to one category SOPFFO forward among them onto the field. You do that first. Then you do the stuff with getting rid of the other cards. But then it says after all that, the forwards element becomes... So basically, playing it to the field happens, and at that point in time, assuming it wasn't already a light or dark card, it was whatever its other element was, which means it was legal to play onto the field. So if you already controlled it like a light character, then when you played that forward, it was legal to play it onto the field. But now, after it's already on the field, Chaos Advent turns it into dark, and then now you have a rules issue, and then rule processes will force you to put all of them, all the light and dark cards you control, into the break zone. So it's pointing out that you can get hosed here if you already control light or dark when you resolve this ability. Last entry says, when a forward card is placed on the field in this situation, the one they just described, it is counted as having its original element. We just talked about that. And it says, this means that auto abilities triggered when a darkness element card is placed on the field will not trigger. They are consistent about using the word darkness here. What that means is if you had an auto ability that says when a dark character or when a dark forward enters the field, do XYZ, that won't trigger, because again, at the time that the forward was played to the field, it wasn't dark yet. I mean, unless it was already its original element was dark. But if it was, again, an earth card, then it entered the field as an earth card, and then it had its attribute changed later. And then at that point, it didn't enter as that. So just a whole lot of nuances about how this effect works, which is why it makes sense this to be a red one, just because there's a lot of things to keep track of here that are not necessarily the way we're used to seeing cards either get played to the field or have their attributes changed and kind of the order of all that. Next up, another red one, but a lot less words. Gulool Ja Ja. So the effect here, or the entry says, when Gulool Ja Ja blocks a party attack and damage is divided, the damage inflicted by Gulool Ja Ja's auto ability will be the same as either of the amounts of damage assigned. What are they talking about? So this guy, or guys, because there's two heads, I don't know, I'm not sure if we're supposed to, I'm not sure if it's a they situation, if it's multiple people in one body. But anyway, this thing says that it's got an auto ability that when it deals damage to a forward, you choose one forward opponent controls other than that forward and deal it the same amount of damage. That's pretty straightforward when you're like attacking or blocking and it's just one forward against one forward. Makes sense. But, and it does say this effect will trigger only once per turn. So the question is, if Gulool Ja Ja is blocking a party and you assign the damage, let's say that there's two forwards and you assign 5,000 to one and 3,000 to the other. The question is, when this auto ability triggers, is it going to deal 5,000 damage to something else or 3,000 damage, right? How is that working? And what they're saying is that it triggers only once per turn, but because both would trigger simultaneously, you essentially get to choose which one of those trigger events is the one that actually goes off, so to speak, right? Excuse me, I'm fighting off a cold here a bit. So what they're saying is you get to choose. So if you want the 5,000 damage to be the one that triggers it, great. Now it'll deal 5,000 damage to something else. If you want the 3,000 damage to be the one that for some reason that gets like not copied, but gets duplicated, I guess, and then goes copied and duplicated. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Oh boy. But anyway, if you want the 3000 to be the one that triggers this, and then 3000 gets does something else, then you can do it that way. So they're just clarifying here, and that's not really a situation we see come up, which is why I put it as red, because it's not something that's very intuitive or that we've seen a lot on other cards before. So yeah, you get to decide which essentially which division is the one that triggers this and gets referenced for dealing that damage. Okay, Samurai. So Samurai says, if the cost of the Samurai card is reduced by 1 due to an effect, it is possible to reduce extra wind cost. Samurai here has this ability. This is part of a cycle, by the way. There's 6 of these that all have the same entry, so we'll be referencing back to Samurai as we go on. But this one says, if you cast Samurai, you may pay wind and 2 of any element CP as an extra cost. So as I mentioned earlier with Ifrit, all costs are paid at the same time. So extra costs don't get paid afterward. They get lumped in, and then all costs are paid at the same time. So when you have this situation, you're paying the 1 fire, and then you also have 1 wind, and then 2 of any, and you will generate CP all at the same time to cover that entire cost. And no matter what happens, because we are casting the card normally, you're still bound by the fact that at least 1 CP you generate needs to match the element or elements of the card that you're casting. So Samurai, no matter what happens, because you're casting it normally, you're going to have to, if you're paying at all, if it's not free, you're going to have to pay 1 fire. But what they're saying here is that if you had an effect that said like, oh, reduces the cost by 1 of Samurai, what you can choose to do is you can say, oh, well, I'm going to choose to reduce specifically the wind CP off of this. Totally legal. You can do that. And that means that now you're going to have to pay the 1 fire and the 2 of any CP, and you pay them all at the same time, but you pay that 3 CP, and it doesn't have to include wind anymore. It's not possible to get rid of the fire requirement, which is why I pointed out the whole thing about the normal rule about casting here. So you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to get rid of the fire, and I'm just going to pay a wind and 2 of anything else. Doesn't work, because we're still bound by the fact that we're casting this card normally, and that's kind of an immutable thing there, unless the card itself was somehow being cast for free. But if we're paying anything at all, we still have to pay the 1 fire. But the wind, that's not an element of the card. That can get removed. So when we remove CP from a cost getting reduced, we get to decide which part of that cost gets removed, other than the whole rule about the element of the card. So that's what they're specifying here. And again, this is going to come up not just on the cycle of cards, but also with some other cards later on. Okay, Xande. Xande's got a few entries here. The first one is, this is actually an important one. It says, a job is named for the first of this card's auto abilities at the point when the effects are resolved. It is not possible to interrupt the sequence using summons or abilities after the job has been named. So Xande's effect says, when Xande enters the field, name 1 job. All the forwards with the named job opponent controls lose all their abilities until the end of the turn. They're specifying here that when an auto ability triggers, there's very few things that happen. There's 4 categories. One is selecting from multiple actions. The second one is choosing effects. The third is assigning different effects to different targets, and the fourth one is assigning different values to different targets. Those are the only 4 things that happen when an auto ability goes on the stack. Everything else happens when it resolves. And the other part of this that you have to understand is that once an auto ability starts resolving, you can't interrupt it resolving. It must resolve completely before anything else can happen. So because this is not one of these auto abilities that has a when you do so and generates a second auto ability that goes on the stack, once we started this, there's no window where anything else can be done or added. Like, even if things trigger, they got to wait till this all finishes. So what they're saying is, you can't wait till your opponent says, oh, I named job Knight, and then they go, oh, I'm gonna Amaterasu that. Doesn't work. Can't do that. So you don't know what job they're gonna name until it resolves, and once it resolves, the whole thing's gonna happen, including all the characters forwards. Sorry, all the forwards of that job losing their abilities is all gonna happen at that point. So you don't have a window there. Okay, the second thing is about his second auto ability, which second auto ability, it triggers at the beginning of the attack phase, it deals damage, but the important part here is the end where it says, after you deal the damage, it says draw one card, then discard one card. If you discard a card named Xande by this effect, trigger this auto ability again. We've had some effects like this in FFTCG before, where you have an ability that, or an effect that can repeat itself, but not very often. So it makes sense that they would want to call this out here. So they're saying if a card named Xande card is discarded to trigger the auto ability again, the auto ability is added to the stack at the point when the forward is selected. The translation on this entry is not great, but they're basically just saying that that after you discard the Xande, it's going to trigger it again, which means it's going to go on the stack and you're going to choose the target again. So they're kind of just saying what's already on the card there. Last bit says if the auto ability is re-triggered and a card named Xande card is discarded again, it will trigger once more. So essentially, this can keep looping for as many times as you discard card named Xande to it. So if you triggered once, you did it, you go to the part where you discard a Xande, hey, it triggered again. You do that, you resolve it. At the end of it, you draw a card again and discard a card. If you discard another Xande, you just triggered it again. We go back a third time, and you just, for however many times you have Xandes in your hand to discard, it will keep doing this over and over again. There's nothing in there that says it will only potentially trigger a second time and then stop. So knock yourselves out. Xande.deck. All right, next up, Zell. Zell here says the division of damage is decided at the point this ability is placed on the stack. So his auto ability says when Zell enters the field, choose any number of forwards, divide 5,000 damage among them as you like. If you control 4 more category 8 characters, divide 9,000 instead. And then they mentioned the units must be 1,000. So this is one of the 4 things I mentioned earlier already, which is 4 things that happen when an auto is put on the stack: selecting for multiple actions, choosing targets, assigning effects to different targets, and assigning values to different targets. This is that last one. So we're assigning the value of damage to different targets that happens when it's going on the stack, not when it's resolving, when it's going on the stack. So when you're putting on the stack, you're going to say, I'm choosing these targets, and this is how much damage is going to each one of them. It's not going to, the damage is not happening when you're assigning it, but you're saying that when this resolves, that's how it's going to resolve. Now, the second part of this is kind of connected to that. It says if the 9,000 damage is divided, but there are no longer 3 or fewer category 8 characters at the point when this effect is resolved, the divided up 9,000 damage is still inflicted. This is one of those. Again, I copied this word for word from them. But even I didn't catch this before when I was looking at it. This is actually an incorrect translation. It says if there are no longer 3 or fewer characters, if there was 3 or fewer characters, then you wouldn't have gotten the 9,000 to begin with. So what they're trying to say there is if there are now 3 or fewer characters. So when this triggered, you had 4 category 8 characters. So you went, cool, I'm going to divide 9,000. You get 4,000, you get 5,000. And then before it resolves, one of your characters goes away. Now you only have 3 category 8 characters. So it's a natural question to go, well, wait, now that we're resolving this, and there's only 3 category 8 characters, is it still going to deal 9,000 damage? And they're saying yes. Basically, that value gets locked in once it's put on the stack. So even though we're used to things being checked on resolution almost every single time, this is an exception to that. So the damage, again, it was assigned, it was locked in, not going to change. You could have 0 Final Fantasy VIII characters when it resolves, and you're still going to deal the 9,000 split up amongst whoever's still there. So, yep, that's another important one. Zeromus. So Zeromus has this auto ability. It says, when 1 or more characters you control are chosen by your opponent's summoner ability, if your opponent doesn't pay 4 or a crystal, cancel its effects. And what they're pointing out here in this FAQ entry is they're just saying it will only be triggered once if an opponent's single summoner ability causes multiple characters under your control to be selected simultaneously. And this is green because this is something we saw all the time with the Wind Cecil, who has a similar ability, except that it just made you pay 2. But his ability also said when 1 or more characters you control are chosen. So the trigger event here is when 1 or more, which means that one effect choosing multiple targets is not going to trigger for each one of those targets. It's all under the umbrella of, oh, it's 1 or more single trigger event. So If they have something like that Zell we just went over that chooses multiple targets, it's only going to trigger Zeromus once here. That's what they're pointing at. Terra. So, Terra's got a couple auto abilities here, and they have entries for both of them. The first one here says it is possible to add up to 2 cards to your hand using this card's first auto ability, but it is not possible to add 1 lightning and 1 wind element card. This entry is one of those that should be kind of fairly obvious, but you know, her auto says that you flip the top 2 cards of your deck and reveal them. You can add up to 1 fire card and up to 1 wind or lightning card among them to your hand. So they're just making sure it's clear that you can add a total of 2 cards to your hand if one of them is fire and the other one is wind or lightning, but you can't add a wind and a lightning. Like, there's 1 slot for a fire card and there's 1 slot for wind or lightning, but it's not 2 slots that are fire or wind or lightning. And just reading the ability should make that clear, but they felt the need to point that out. Second part of this says if a multi-element card has any of the relevant elements, then it can be added to the player's hand as a card of that element. For example, it would be possible to add 1 card with a fire and wind as a fire card, and another card with fire and wind as a wind card. So what they're saying here is that dual element cards, when you select them for this ability, you can decide which element they're fulfilling. Like I said, there's 2 slots there, right? So if I had like a 4-element warrior of light, that's one of them, I can choose to have that go either into the fire slot or into the wind/lightning slot, and fulfill that. Even it doesn't have to, just because it's a fire card doesn't mean it has to go into the fire slot. It can also go into the other one. So in that sense, you can kind of work around. It gives you more options, right, on how you do it. So you can put something that was fire and wind, go, I'm going to put that in the wind slot, and then another card that's just fire into the fire slot. And the last thing has to do with her second auto ability, which her second auto ability is when you cast a wind or lightning card, you may dull an active Terra. When you do so, choose 1 forward, deal it 8,000 damage. Their entry says the second auto ability dulls the Terra card at the point when effects are resolved. And then so this part of it tells you it's the when you do so thing. It's saying that, you know, after you've done so, which is dulling an active her, then you put it to the stack. But they add in here, it says if Terra has left the field before effects are resolved, then it will not be possible to inflict the damage. I don't like their wording on this, but basically what they're saying here is they're pointing out the fact that when the second auto ability triggers, you're not dulling her at that point in time. You don't dull her until that resolves, and then when you dull her on resolution of that, then you add the when you do so portion. So they're saying this auto will trigger, it will go onto the stack, but if she's no longer on the field or she's no longer active when this resolves, then you're not going to be able to get the choose 1 forward, deal 8,000 damage, because it's not possible to dull her, because either she's not active or she's not there. But you can't be like, oh, well, I would have dulled her, but she's off the field now. Like, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, they're just kind of pointing out that that happens on resolution, but also if she's not there on resolution, there's no way to get that when you do so. Luneth. Luneth has this auto ability that reveals top card of your deck. It says if it is a character of cost 3 or less, play it onto the field. And their entry says if that reveal is a character with the same name as a character already on your field that does not also have the general unit icon. I just realized general unit icon. I feel like I've seen it described as a different name before. But I don't know. That's a topic for another time. If it doesn't have the general unit icon, that card cannot be played to the field. This is a straightforward thing. Anytime we have an effect that would, if the effect itself would cause a character to enter the field, that it's illegal for that character to enter the field, then the rules say that card just stays in the zone that it was in. It just fails to get played to the field if it was illegal. So in this case, you would reveal the top card of your deck. It's illegal to play to the field. You just flip it back over. It stays on top of the deck. Bard. All right, we made it to ice cards. Bard is the same thing as Samurai. So if you want a more detailed explanation, you can go back to Samurai and hear that bit again. But yeah, if you are reducing the cost here, you can choose to reduce the earth out of it, and you just pay 1 ice and 3 of any other element. Kefka. Kefka's complicated. In more ways than one. Kefka the character is complicated. Kefka the card, also complicated. First entry here says, if casting this card in the normal manner by paying 8 CP, it is possible to pay the CP cost by using non-backup cards. This is kind of funny because Kefka has this alternate cost that you can pay, but then they followed up by saying you can only pay this cost with CP produced by backups. So they're just pointing out that if you're paying the 8 CP, like, you're not bound by that restriction. That restriction is only for the alternate costs, and seems obvious enough to me, but they felt like, we should point it out. Now, the second entry has to do with his auto ability. His auto ability says when he enters the field due to your cast, which is one of those balancing things. You can't cheat him into play and get this. But when he enters play due to your cast, you choose a forward opponent controls and up to one backup with a cost equal to or less than the forward in your break zone, and you break the former, which is the forward, and play the latter, the backup, onto the field. So they're saying their entry says, even if the forward selected has left the field by the time the effects are resolved, the backup selected will still enter the field. This is one of those cases where you're choosing two targets. You choose a forward and then you choose up to one backup. So assuming that you did choose a backup, what they're saying is that this effect, it references the cost of the forward, right? It says you choose a backup with cost equal to or less than the forward in your break zone. So they're saying that if the forward leaves the field, the backup still enters the field, which is that's just the case of that there was two targets selected, and there's still one legal target available when it resolves. So you resolve as much as possible, which means that you're going to play the backup. Now, if you're thinking, well, wait, how do we know that the backup is still a valid target when it resolves? Because it's needs to be a backup with cost equal to or less than the forward. Well, in that case, what we're doing is we're referencing the last known last known information, last known cost is what I meant. So we're referencing the CP cost, which is one of those things that actually never changes no matter what zone it's in. So it wasn't going to be a different value anyway. But the game knows that if it was a 5 CP forward, then if it left the field, it knows, well, yeah, you chose a 5 CP forward. And so this backup is still going to be, when it resolves, it's still equal to or less than that cost. We just use the information of it that we already have from when it left the field. And the last bit here is similar to the Samurai and Bard ones that we've gone over already, but it says if the cost of the Kefka card is reduced by 1 due to an effect, it is possible to reduce one of the ice, earth, or lightning costs of your choice instead. So you have that alternate cost here, which is 1 ice, 1 earth, and 1 lightning. And if you're reducing the cost by 1, then you can choose any of those 3 to get rid of. And you might be thinking, if you remember what we talked about with Samurai and Bard, you might be thinking, well, hold on. We said that you couldn't reduce the cost that was part of the card's element because that's just kind of baked into the rules that when you're casting normally, you have to pay 1 at least of all the card's elements. That's true, but this is different because this is not an extra cost. This is an alternate cost. So we are not casting it normally in this situation. We are casting it using the alternate cost completely. We're no longer referencing what the original cost or the original element or any of that was. We're replacing that entirely with this alternate cost. So again, it's not an extra cost, alternate cost. Because we're doing an alternate cost, no longer bound by the rules related to the element of the card itself. Because of that, you can even reduce the ice off of this one. So if you reduced 1, you could just pay earth and lightning and do it that way. And if you want to, you can reduce the earth or the lightning for the same reasons that you could have with the Samurai and the Bard anyway. But yeah, in this case, you can even reduce the ice off of it. And if you reduce the cost by 2, you could pick which 2 and then only pay like 1 lightning or something. All right, Seymour. So here, the first entry is not too complicated. It's just pointing out that the auto ability, it's a when you do so. So the original auto ability, all it does when it resolves is that you can choose to pay 1. When you choose to pay 1, it now generates that second auto, the when you do so, that goes onto the stack. And when that goes onto the stack, that's when you select whatever actions you're doing. The second part of this, though, is the interesting one. It says if the second action is selected, and this is talking about out of the 4 actions there. So the second one is the choose up to 2 characters, dull them, and freeze them. If the second action is selected, but no cards are selected for it, with no target selected for the other actions either, then the effect is not added to the stack. This is one of those things that trips people up. They either don't know it, or they forgot it, or they didn't realize, or some combination. But when you have an effect that says it chooses up to a certain number of targets, you're allowed to choose 0 as an option. You can choose 0 targets. That's totally fine. But what happens is, if you choose 0 targets, then assuming that none of the other parts of that effect also chose a target, then what happens is that you're in the middle of putting this ability on the stack, or this effect onto the stack. You deliberately chose 0 targets, and so now because there's 0 targets, then the way that the rules work, it automatically just removes itself from the stack before anything could even respond to it. So that means that it couldn't be hit with an Amaterasu, because by the time your opponent has priority to cast Amaterasu, it's already removed itself from the stack. So it happens like immediately. So what they're saying here is, if for some reason you said, oh, I'm selecting the second action and the third action, so you choose up to 2 characters, Zell and freeze them, and then the second or the third one's during this turn your next summon costs 4 less. Excuse me. If you did that, and then when you're doing the process, you go, I'm choosing 0 characters. Okay, that's fine. It's legal. But now the whole effect, including the making your next summon reduced by 4, gets removed from the stack. So you actually don't get that cost reduction. Now, because of the way that Seymour works, it says select up to 2, so you don't have to do it that way. You could just select only that third option. You'd be fine. So if you do this the other way that I just described it, you're just misplaying essentially at that point. It's the same thing if you selected the second and fourth actions. You wouldn't your opponent wouldn't discard a card because you chose 0 characters. The whole thing gets removed. That being said, if you selected the first and second options, so the first one also chooses a target, which is choose 1 dull forward and break it. You could select those 2. You would choose a dull forward, and then for the second one, you would choose 0 characters. And in this case, it wouldn't remove itself because it still chooses at least 1 character, 1 target rather, and so it will go onto the stack. So that's fine. But yeah, if you intentionally choose 0 and the rest of the effect is also choosing no targets, the whole thing just gets removed from the stack automatically before anybody gets priority. It still counts as triggering for the purposes of something like, oh no, as soon as I said it, I forgot his name now. It's not Siegfried. The 1 CP Earth forward that triggers off of auto abilities, Mr. Pointing. It's gonna bother me that I don't remember his name now. From Type 0. Anyway, that guy. That will still trigger because this auto ability is still triggered in the first place, but yeah, it gets removed from the stack. Man, I got an itchy nose today. Okay, Moomba. The entry here says, if a forward is to be broken from taking damage, then it needs to have had the damage inflicted during that same turn. It is not possible to break a forward that has had damage ignored during the end phase or through other effects. This is one of those weird things. So Moomba's effect says you choose a forward if it is dull or has received damage, break it. And the problematic stuff here is the idea of has received damage. Because on its face, that if we take that literally, there's so many ways you can interpret that. If it has received damage, you can think, well, it received damage last turn, right? It's received damage, so that it breaks, right? No, it does not. Or if you go, oh, it received damage, but then the opponent cast like Opus 5 Asura and negated the damage, it no longer has the damage on it. But it did receive damage this turn, so it breaks, right? No, it does not. So just like the word negate is problematic in this game because negate does not mean what you would think, the phrasing here on has received damage is also just really poor. Because what they mean by it, like the literal translation of what they mean, or not literal translation, but like what they're trying to say here is they're saying if it currently has damage on it when this effect resolves. When this effect resolves, if it has damage on it, break it. Like currently, at the time it's resolving, then break it. So don't confuse that with, oh, it received damage in the past and it doesn't currently have any damage on it now. It has to currently have damage on it. That's what they mean by has received damage. It's just one of those weird translation language quirks, and that's what they're saying here. Is they're saying it's not possible to break it forward if that has had damage ignored during the end phase or through other effects. So of course the end phase being when damage normally gets removed. And they are pointing out that it needs to have had the damage inflicted during that same turn. We're not talking about like, oh, 3 turns back to receive damage, so Moomba. Raine. Okay. So we're talking about her 2 different effects here. Oddly enough, they do the second one first, if I remember correctly here. Playing a squall on the field. Yeah. So the first one is just a when you do so. They're just describing again when you do so, saying that when it resolves, you just add, it generates a new auto, adds it to the stack. That's fine. The second one here is the reason why this is yellow, because the second one says if the player has lost control of a card named Laguna before the CP are paid, then it will no longer be possible to pay those CP. So this is just a funny situation. The second effect here says, if you control a card named Laguna, you may pay ice and 1. When you do so, search for 1 card named Squall and play it onto the field. So what they're saying here is that when this triggers, you don't pay at that point, right? You pay on resolution. It goes back to what I've been saying so far about the 4 things that happen when you when an effect is put on the stack, and paying this ice and 1 doesn't fit within those 4 things. So the auto ability, it triggers, but then it just goes onto the stack and you haven't paid yet, nothing's happened. And so so they're basically saying that, you know, maybe you controlled a Laguna and you selected that option because it worked, because you did have a Laguna, so good on you. But then when you go to resolve, if you don't control a Laguna, well, at that point it's checking, do you control Laguna right now? No. Well, then you can't pay the cost there. So yeah, just make sure you don't have a Laguna that can get blown up between when Raine triggers and when it resolves, I guess. Red Mage. All right, this is the 3rd one in our cycle from Samurai and Bard. So I'm not going to go into it other than just to remind you that, yes, you can, if you're reducing the cost by 1, that lightning can be the cost reduced, and you now just pay 1 wind and 3 of whatever. Vaan. Vaan, arguably within these FAQs, the most problematic card. He's problematic because of the second action on his auto ability. Second action here says, search for up to 2 Job Sky Pirate backups of cost 2 or less and play them onto the field. So he's going into your deck, he's choosing 2 Sky Pirate backups, playing them onto the field simultaneously. Anytime you have multiple cards being played onto the field simultaneously, there's a chance for shenanigans. And especially when there's backups, you have an extra layer of shenanigans possible, and that's what all of these are covering. So, first entry says, it is still possible to play 2 backup cards onto the field when you already control 4 backup cards, but after doing so, the rules will force you to place the extras in the break zone so the total does not exceed 5. So what they're saying is that you control 4 backups already, you play Vaan, you resolve the effect, you go and you search 2 backups, and both those backups do enter the field. The reason why they enter the field is because when an effect is resolving and it's checking the validity and the legality of playing that card to the field, it's checking 2 things. It's saying, is this a card that's not multiplay and you already control one of those? Like basically the card name check, right? You know, are you legally allowed to play this card name onto the field right now? And the second is if it's, there's 3 of them. Second is light and dark cards. It's checking, if this is a light or dark card, do you already control any other light or dark cards? Third thing is if this is a backup, do you already control 5 backups? If any of those things get flagged, essentially, the effect will not play it to the field. So you might think, well, wait, we're playing 2 backups to the field, so doesn't it know that I'm going to end up with too many backups? Is it going to force me to only choose one of them and then the other one doesn't play? No, because it's checking the validity of these 2 cards separately. So it's looking individually, and it's going, all right, are you a light or dark card? No. Do you already control this card name? No. Do you have 5 backups? No. All right, cool. Wait here. And then it goes to the other one. It goes, do you control this card name already? No. Are you light or dark? No. Is there 5 more backups already? No. And it goes, okay, you're both cleared to go. And then it resolves and it plays them both to the field. And now you have 6 backups on the field. But then, right after it resolves, turn player's about to gain priority, and rule processes comes in and goes, hey, you have 6 backups. That's not cool. We got to take care of this before anybody even gets priority in the first place, right? We got to clean this up. You're breaking the rules. So they're saying, yes, you are allowed to play those 2. You will end up with 6 backups on the field. And then pretty much immediately after that, you're going to have to, among those 6, select enough backups to be put into the break zone, so that you do not have more than 5. Now, rules wise, they are put into the break zone. They're not broken. So you can't select something that can't be broken and go, haha, can't be broken. Like the old Sid Waff. No, that's a monster. The old one was a monster. No, it was a backup. Yeah. The old Sid Waff, which is backup, says it cannot be broken. You can't just like cheekily go, all right, Sid Waff, it can't be broken, right? No, it's put into the break zone. And if for some reason this process ended up giving you more than 6 backups, then you would end up going down to 5. So yeah, that's how that works out. But it doesn't force you to put the new ones in there. If you wanted, you could select the first backup you played that game and put that into the break zone. As long as you just now, among those 6, you choose one of them to vote off the island, and now you take care of that. Second entry says if you are already in control of 5 backup cards, then it is not possible to play any more onto the field. So in this case, I mentioned the checks where it's checking the validity of each card individually. But now, if you have 5 backups, then when it's checking the validity of these cards, it gets to that third question. Do you control 5 backups? Yeah. Well then, no, it's illegal for this card to enter the field. It will not enter the field. And then when it checks the other one, do you control 5 backups? Yes. Well then, no, you're not legal either. So both of them are now invalid and they won't get played. Third entry says it is possible to search for 2 backup cards with the same name and play both of them to the field. However, after doing so, the rules will force you to place them in the break zone. This is a fun one. If you're familiar with the Regis double Renoa trick, then you already know this rule. But basically, going back to those checks I was just talking about, the first check was, do you already control a card of this name? So let's say that I want to play a Balthier backup. Let's say I want to play 2 Balthier backups off of this Vaan. So I've got them both there, and individually the game checks. It goes, okay, do you already control a card named Balthier? And it looks at your field and goes, no, you don't control a card named Balthier. Then it goes over to this one, and it goes, okay, do you already control a card named Balthier? It checks again. Nope, no Balthier there. So it goes, cool, you're clear to go. Both of you can legally enter the field. And just like the backup situation, well, this is still a backup situation, but just like the max backup situation, they both enter the field, and then immediately after that, rules processes goes, what are you doing? This is against the rules. And then at that point, it forces you, because they're both the same card name, you can't control 2 card name Balthier at the same time. They both get put into the break zone. So that's what it's saying there. Now, the last entry here says it is not possible to search out a backup card that has the same name as a character that you already control. I'm a broken record at this point, but if we go back to that checking again, right? 3 things on the list. Can you play this card name? Is it light or dark? Do you already control 5 backups? So this is that same thing again. It goes, do you already control a card named Balthier? Yes, you do. Well, then it can't go out there, right? And then if your other card was not Balthier, if it was Fran or something, then it'd go, okay, well, you're clear to go. It'll play the Fran, but the Balthier would be illegal. If that wasn't enough for you already, this is not actually the end of Vaughn's FAQ entry. He's got a whole nother one. Because this last entry takes up as much space as the rest combined. Oh, God help us. All right. So it says, if you are already controlling 4 backup cards, again, our translation here is spot on. If you are already controlling 4 backup cards and then use this card's ability to search for 2 backup cards with the same name and play them to the field, the rules will force you to place the remaining cards to meet the total of 5 backups and the cards with a duplicate name in the break zone simultaneously. This means that if there are 2 characters with the same name included in the backups left on the field, then a total of 3 cards will be placed in the break zone, the 2 duplicate name cards and the final backup that was not left down. If only one of the 2 characters with the same name that were searched out is included in the backup cards left on the field, then only the 2 backups with the same name that were searched out will be placed in the break zone. I'm going to be honest, when I was reading this earlier to go over things, I had to read it probably 5 times before I really made sure that I 100% understood what was being said here. So you probably did not understand that just by me reading it to you. They're essentially combining everything we just talked about into one big word problem here. So what they're saying is, let's say we had 4 backups already, and then we want those 2 Balthiers on the field. So we do it, and none of the backups we control are Balthiers. They're all summoners, right? We got 4 summoners, and then we resolve this effect. We play 2 Balthiers to the field, so now we've got 4 summoners and 2 Balthiers. And again, like at this point, rule processes are like, what the hell are you doing? You've got 6 and you have 2 of the same. Like, do you even know how this game works? So the thing is, we have to fix both these problems of rule processes at the same time. We don't get to like, they're simultaneous. So we don't get to like fix one and then fix the other. We have to fix all of them. So they're basically telling you that there's 2 potential scenarios that are going to play out here. You've got the 4 summoners, you have the 2 Balthiers. So you're going to have to go down to 5 backups, right? So the easy version of this is if you go, okay, well, my 5 backups are going to be 4 summoners and Balthier. And they go, cool, all right, that's your 5. But by the way, that Balthier was already breaking the rules with Balthier number 2, so we're taking both the Balthiers away. And then when this all resolves, you've got 4 summoners left on the field, right? That's the easy version. The version that's a little bit weirder to understand is you got the 4 summoners, you have the 2 Balthiers, and you got them all out there, and you say, okay, the 5 backups that I'm gonna work myself down to 5 backups. I'm gonna keep 3 summoners and 2 Balthiers. All right, that 4th summoner is going into the break zone so that I only have 5 backups. And they go, all right, cool, thank you for doing that. By the way, the Balthiers are illegal, and now they're gone. So now you're left with 3 backups. So that summoner just got kicked to the curb, even though you didn't technically need to. But because you went, oh, my 5 are going to be 3 summoners and 2 Balthiers, you basically just volunteered that 4th summoner to go off into the void just cuz. So you can do that. There's a non-zero amount of situations where that might be something you want to do. Maybe you're playing Kunshira and you really want to be back down to 3 backups for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, that's what this giant paragraph means. It's just saying that there's 2 possible ways to resolve that situation, and one of them the result is that you have 3 summoners left on the field, and the other one, the result is you have 4 summoners left on the field. In none of those scenarios will the Balthiers survive. But it's just interesting, again, way out in the weeds. Vaan's a problematic card, but only if you make him. Just don't play 2 Balthiers at the same time. You'll be good. Okay, Wendigo. Speaking of multiples of the same card at the same time, Wendigo is a really interesting card because it's the only card in the game that has this effect right now. It's got a field ability that says you can play 2 or more card named Wendigo onto the field. So we don't have any other like cards that don't have the multiplay symbol that let you play multiple of them that I can think of. God, I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm fairly certain this is the first time ever. So the first time that one of these enters the field, now the field ability is in effect, and now you're allowed to play other copies of it. What's funny is because it doesn't limit it to 3; it says 2 or more. So if your opponent has Wendigos and you somehow steal them with Zidane or something, then you can have 6 Wendigos. Or if you were drafting this set and things worked out really weird, you could have a whole lot more than 6 Wendigo. Not likely because it's a hero, but I think it's possible. So the first entry says, if 2 or more Wendigos that you control have, by the way, I don't know if Wendigos is the proper pluralization of Wendigo. Maybe Wendigo is also the pluralization. I'm just saying. If 2 or more Wendigos that you control have all lost their abilities, then the rules will force you to place them all in the break zone. If none of them have lost their abilities, then they are not placed in the break zone. I just realized when I copied and pasted this, they have a comma at the end of that one. That's so, again, doing a paying up job with these FAQs. But so what they're saying here is they phrased it awkwardly because they said if 2 or more Wendigos have all lost their abilities. So they're saying if all of the if you control at least 2 Wendigo and all of them get lose their abilities, then because none of them now have the ability, it says you can play 2 or more of them onto the field. Now rule processes comes along again, and it's just like, didn't we just talk about this with Vaan? But rule processes says you can't control multiple Wendigo. They've all going to be put into the break zone. But as long as at least one Wendigo is on the field and has that ability, that field ability, you're safe. You only need one of them to have it. So that's what they're saying, is that at least one of them has it, or if none of them have lost their abilities, then they're fine. Second entry. If a Wendigo present on the field loses its ability before the effects of its auto ability are resolved, then it will not be possible to play any card name Wendigo cards to the field. So here's the sad bit. Or if somebody is terrorizing you at locals with Wendigo, then it's not the sad bit. This is your play. So Wendigo has the auto ability that when it enters the field, 2 auto abilities. One of them is that you can search for up to 2 in your deck and play them onto the field dull. The other one is that you can play all the Wendigo that are in your break zone on the field dull. So these auto abilities grab the other Wendigo and play them onto the field. But what they're saying is when those ability, I tried to say auto and ability at the same time and I ended up with abilities. When those auto abilities are still on the stack, they haven't resolved yet. If Wendigo loses its abilities or is no longer on the field, for that matter, so you no longer have that ability that says you can play 2 or more of them on the field. Actually, no, I got to revise this. If that's funny, I didn't think about that. If the Wendigo leaves the field, then you still can play multiple at the same time because and that'll actually work out. Rule processes will be like, oh, that's fine. But if this Wendigo loses its ability, it's still on the field, but it lost ability, so you still control it. Then when the other auto abilities go to resolve, they will do that check that I just talked about extensively with Vaan, and it will say, do you already control a card named Wendigo? And you'll be like, yes. And I'll be like, well, then this cannot enter the field. And you're like, but this Wendigo says it can play 2. Yeah, but that one's not on the field yet. It's not on the field yet, so that one's field ability doesn't count. And the one out here lost its field ability, which means illegal. Can't enter the field. So that's what they're saying here. So it's an interesting situation and really forces you to learn or make sure that you know all the rules around unique named cards and when they can be played and when they can't be played. Balthier, we talked about him extensively in the Vaan situation. Luckily, his own card, very easy to understand. He's just got a when you do so. And yeah, the when you do so is it's an auto that goes on the stack after you've done the thing. So it's just saying it generates a second auto. That second auto gets put on the stack. The end. He's a lot more complicated than his buddy. All right, Reks. So Reks, also kind of the same thing as Balthier, which normally I would put green for that, but there's a little kind of caveat at the end of this. So it's a when you do so, which means yes, after you do the thing, generates a second auto, puts it on the field. The extra thing here is that they point out, it says if Reks, at the end of this, if Reks leaves the field before effects are resolved, then it is not possible to draw cards. What they're saying here is that because his effect says put Reks into the break zone, if for some reason he leaves the field before you resolve this first ability, it's not possible to put him into the break zone. And so because you can't put him in the break zone, you don't get to draw 2 cards. It harkens back to the old the Opus 4 cycle of monsters, including Leon and Hilgigas and things like that. It's got to be there when it resolves, otherwise you don't get to do the thing. All right, Galuf. Same thing. It's a when you do so. So yeah, nothing else to say about that. When you do the thing, generates a second auto that gets put on the stack, and then you resolve that. The end. Cindy. So Cindy has something in common with the Terra card, if you have been watching all the way through this, or you're familiar with that already. Terra had the situation where she had two slots for cards that were being added to your hand. One was for a fire card, the other one was for a wind or lightning card. With Cindy, it's the same idea, but different elements. So when she enters the field, you reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add up to 1 earth card. So slot number 1 is an earth card, and up to 1 ice or lightning card among them to your hand, and return the others to the bottom of your deck in any order. So that second slot is ice or lightning. So their first entry here says, it is possible to add up to 2 cards to your hand using this card's first auto ability, but it is not possible to add 1 lightning and 1 ice element card. So one of the cards you add has to be earth, and the other one is one of the other 2. And then just like Terra, they also give the other example here about multi-element cards, saying that the multi-element card can fulfill either of the slots if it's eligible for either one. So if you had a earth lightning card, that can go either into the lightning / ice slot or into the earth slot. Yeah, so you have the versatility there with multi-element cards. So really all of her rulings are the same as Terra, if you understood or watched that already, and got all that. So we're just reiterating that. Summoner, the 4th card in this cycle that included Samurai, Bard, and Red Mage. Now we're at Summoner. Same idea. If you reduce its cost by 1, you can reduce the water right out of it and just pay 1 earth and 3 of anything. Hashmal. Hashmal, we're giving the same ruling here as what happened with Xande. We're reiterating that idea that when something goes onto the stack, only 4 things happen: selecting for multiple actions, choosing targets, assigning effects, and assigning... oh no, I've lost it. It's not assigning damage, but assigning values. There we go. Assigning values to different things. So here, the effect says name 1 job or category, but that doesn't happen until it resolves. So when you cast this, you're not doing that at the time. It's not like choosing targets, right? You're not going to name anything until it resolves. And because of that, and the fact that once an effect starts resolving, you can't interrupt that with anything else. That means that at the time that your opponent names the job or category, we're already in the middle of resolving. You have to do the whole thing here. They can't, like, in the middle of it go, oh, okay, now that you've named it, now I'm going to do an effect. Doesn't work. Pictomancer. This is a when you do so. The second auto ability has a when you do so. As I've said before, when you do the thing, generates a second auto goes on the stack, then you resolve that as normal. Prompto, not a when you do so. So Prompto, we're talking about his auto ability that starts on the 3rd line there. And really the whole purpose of this is to point out that the phrasing on his effect says your opponent selects 1 forward of the highest cost they control. They're just pointing out that if they control multiple cards that are whatever the highest cost is, but they're the same cost, they only have to select 1 of them. And this, if you're a FFTCG boomer like myself, and you played since the beginning, you've known this rule since Opus 2 Tifa, good old 5 CP Tifa. It talked about the highest cost card, and we knew that would only be 1. You wouldn't, if there was multiple of them, you wouldn't get to double dip, as it were. So yeah, this is a straightforward ruling. It's not one that we see very often, but I feel like it should be obvious, but maybe you've never seen it before. Riddar. So Riddar has this action ability. It says choose 1 forward you control other than Riddar, and then during this turn, the next damage dealt to it is dealt to Riddar instead. You can only use this ability once per turn. The FAQ entry says that the source of the damage that is taken in place of the selected forward does not change. So, for example, if damage from Opus 19 Bahamut is taken by Riddar in place of another card, Riddar is removed from the game, because I don't have it on top or in front of us here, but Opus 19 Bahamut is one of the many Bahamuts that say if the forward that's dealt damage by it is put in the break zone this turn, it's removed from the game instead. So they're just pointing out here that if we had a different, let's see, Riddar's a knight. If Beatrix was about to get blasted with Bahamut and Riddar goes, nope, hit me instead. If Riddar does take the damage, it ends up going into the, or at least ends up going to the break zone that turn. Um, the there's no weird thing about like the damage coming from Beatrix or something. Like they're basically saying that in rules terms, the Bahamut is still choosing Beatrix, but the damage is being received by Riddar, which means that that still counts for the purpose of making sure that we resolve Bahamut correctly. That Riddar's the one to receive the damage, so even though Riddar was the one chosen, if he's put in the break zone, then he's going to get removed as a result of Bahamut's effect there. And we've seen a similar thing with there's the Titus that can take damage for Yuna. Same idea. All right, Adel. This is a when you do so. So not again, same thing as usual. Do the thing. When the thing resolves, generates a second auto ability. Second auto ability goes in the stack. Resolve that as normal. The only thing I'm going to point out about this that's a little bit different, just because I find it funny, is that again their phrasing on this, their wording says the auto ability to enhance Adel is then added to the stack. I just love that the way they phrase that there, because normally they're very specific about the auto ability to blah blah blah, and then they but here to enhance Adel. Just it's not a vocab vocab word that we see in FFTCG very often, or ever maybe. So I just like that somewhere along the process of translating this, they went, let's call it enhancing. So fun. All right, Kain. Kain has this field ability that can reduce his costs. As if you have cast a Job Dragoon or card named Dragoon this turn, the cost required to cast Kain is reduced by 3. And their entry here says that the cost to cast Kain will only be reduced by 3, even if 2 Dragoons are cast in a single turn. And I marked this as green because it feels like it should be obvious to me, but I like the idea of the gumption of somebody who goes, no, I cast 2 Dragoons, so he's reduced by 6, and now I have a free Kain. No, you don't. But I don't know. It's funny that they thought that, again, a non-zero number of people would try to do that. So it doesn't say for each Job Dragoon that you've cast the cost is reduced. It says if you have cast. So it's just it's a binary thing, right? You either have cast the Dragoon or you have not cast your Dragoon. So either you get the cost reduced by 3 or you don't get the cost reduced by 3. Machinist, the 5th one in our cycle of, let's see if I remember them all. Samurai, Bard, Red Mage, and Summoner. Now we're at Machinist. Same idea. If you reduce the cost by 1, you can reduce the fire out of it and just pay lightning and 3. Nothing else to say there. Kylma. All right, so Kylma has this action ability to choose a forward and break it, but then the rest of this effect says remove the top 2 cards of your deck from the game for each CP required to cast the chosen forward. So if you had chosen a 2 CP forward, then after you break it, then you have to remove 4 cards from the top of your deck. Now their entry here says that the cards from your deck must be removed from the game even if the selected forward has the never broken attribute and cannot be broken. This is another one of my favorite translations they put in here, the never broken attribute. That's their way of saying if it's under an effect that says it cannot be broken. So if you have a forward that cannot be broken, let's say 7 CP Ardent, 7 CP Earth Ardent. Dang, I have to be more specific because now there's a 7 CP Lightning Ardent. 7 CP Earth Ardent just has that field ability that says Ardent cannot be broken. So what they're saying is that if you were to choose that Ardent with Kylma, then when you go to resolve it, Ardent's still a valid target. He's still a forward. You can still choose him. But when you go to resolve it, it will break him, or well, it will say, hey, break him. And then his field ability says, I can't be broken. And then the effect goes, okay. But then it still, because we still had a legal target, it still resolves. And so the rest of it says to remove the top 2 cards of your deck from the game for each required CP to cast it. So in that case, you would then put 14 cards from the top of your deck on remove from play. So yeah, they're just pointing out that something can't be broken. It's still a valid target, which means you still resolve the effect, even though the effect didn't do what you wanted it to do, right? It's more or less saying that the removing the cards is not contingent on the card actually having been broken by the effect. So, yeah. So it's a fun one. I mean, it's not a fun one if you're the one who did it, unless you just really wanted to remove a whole lot of cards from your deck from the game. But yeah, that's how that works. The never broken attribute. All right, Ultimecia. So, if I remember correctly, the first one here is just a when you do so. Yeah, it's just describing when you do so. Do the thing, resolve it, generates a new auto, put that on the stack. Cool. We know that. Second bit here is the interesting one. So I will read her effect, though, because we need to understand that to know what's going on here. So it says, when you do so, choose one forward. You gain control of it. Then, if you don't pay cost of 1 for each CP required to cast chosen forward, put it into the break zone. By the way, take a side trip with me for a second. I'm really amused at their wording here. I feel like it's just bad grammar. But it says for each CP required to cast chosen forward. I feel like we should have like the in there, right? For each CP required to cast the chosen forward, but we just skip right past that in the phrasing here. It's clear what it means, but just, I don't know, bothered me. I'm like, well, are we missing an article in here to cast the chosen forward? But anyway, so the effect works by taking control of a forward. You have to pay 1 for each CP to cast it, and then if you don't do that, it gets put in the breakstone. So their entry here says the CP are paid after the control is switched, and accordingly, if the CP are not paid, then the forward card is placed in the break zone from the field of the player who has just obtained control. Little clarification I want to put here. They say it's placed in the break zone from the field of the player who has just obtained control. I need to clarify, there's only one field. So this is another translation issue, and not the first time they've had translation issues with referencing the field. So when they're saying the field of the player, each player doesn't have their own field zone. There's only one field, but you have your own side of it, so to speak. So what they're trying to say here is that it will go into the break zone from the side of the field of the player who controls it. So what they're saying is the way this effect resolves, you take control of it, and then we do the payment part. So if you choose not to pay for it, it does go to the break zone. But because you controlled it at the time that it's being broken, any auto abilities that trigger from it going to the break zone are yours, essentially. So if you steal a 6 CP Opus 1 Golbez and then go, I'm not going to pay the 6, then cool. Golbez breaks, and now you get the effect to search your deck for up to 4 2 CP forwards of different elements. So they're just pointing out the timing of this. The timing is very intentional, which is that you gain control of it either way. But if you don't pay, then it breaks while it's under your control, not while it's under your opponent's control. That being said, I guess I should point out, this is not part of their thing, but I should point out since we're talking about it. There's no timing between when you take control of it and the having to pay bit. So if you're not planning on paying for it, you can't take control of it and then use Lady Lilith to remove it from the game or something. There's no window in there because there isn't a when you do so or something. So the timing works for having control of auto abilities related to it leaving the field or going to the break zone, but that's it. So that's what they're pointing out here. Okay, Garnet, nice and easy one here. They just say triggering of the X burst is optional, which is that's a basic rule, but it's one that a lot of people don't know at first when they're playing. It says there is no need to always place 3 cards in the break zone. And so this is funny because Garnet's auto ability, she says when Garnet enters the field, put the top 3 cards of your deck into the break zone. Now when you're just casting her when she's entering the field, you don't get to choose. You have to put 3 cards in the break zone. That's just part of playing her. But they're pointing out that X bursts are always optional. So if this comes up as an X burst, normally there's not really a benefit to putting 3 cards in your break zone. I mean, some decks, if you're doing Raijin Fujin stuff, then yeah, sure, absolutely. But they're just pointing out that, yeah, as an X burst, you don't have to do it. It's it's the only situation I can think of where the X burst is put on there to make it it makes the card It balances the card in a way that makes it not. So, well, no, because if they just didn't put X burst, then it wouldn't. You wouldn't have to do it on X burst anyway. Yeah, it's a really weird X burst. Like I said, very few situations where you would want to do that, but they're just saying that since there's very few situations where you'd want to do that, when it comes up in X burst, you don't have to. That's more talking about a green one of these than I should be doing, but yeah, X bursts are optional. Chemist, the 6th and final entry in our series of Samurai, Bard, Red Mage, Summoner, Machinist, and now Chemist. Same thing. Go check out Samurai if you want the long description, but you can reduce the cost by 1 and reduce the ice out of it. You just pay 1 water and 2 of whatever. The end. Okay, Gogo. It's been a while since we had a red one. I think it's been since Vaan, so we were due for another complicated one. Gogo. Before I get into all of his entries here, let's just go over what Gogo does. He's a mime, so surprise, surprise, he copies things. He mimics things. His auto ability says, when Gogo enters the field due to your cast, choose one auto ability triggered from your opponent's forward of cost 4 or less. Gogo triggers the same auto ability. That's where people are going to get caught up, is the idea of Gogo triggers the same auto ability. What does it mean that he triggers the auto ability? And that's what these are here to explain for the most part. So, first entry says, if the auto ability selected is one that lets you choose something to affect, you can select a new target. So they're saying, like, if it was an auto ability that said, like, choose a forward and break it, then you're triggering the same auto ability, but it doesn't mean that it's an exact copy. It doesn't mean that it's going to do the same choices. So when Gogo triggers it, now you get to choose a target to break. So that's what they're saying for that first bit. Second one, the unit that counts as triggering an auto ability copied using Gogo's auto ability is Gogo. And if the auto ability selected to use in this way lets you choose a character that is controlled by the opponent, then you must select one of your opponent's characters. So again, they're just clarifying that you're copying it, but I guess the thing here is that even though we've had Gogos that copied abilities before, they always copied abilities of characters you controlled, and this is the first time we're copying an opponent's ability, and that's why they feel the need to kind of do so much clarification here. So they're saying that you're triggering the same auto ability, but the same auto ability is triggering from Gogo as the source. And so that means two things. One is that if it says, like, choose a forward opponent controls, well, we're talking about the opponent of Gogo, like, not the opponent of whatever the like original version of this auto ability was. So you would have to choose one of your opponent's abilities. And the second thing they're saying is that Gogo is the source of this auto ability. Like, I guess the idea here is that since they're saying Gogo triggers the same auto ability, they might be thinking, oh, is Gogo triggering it from that character, that forward? And the answer is no. He's triggering himself, but he's triggering a copy of it. So that means that when he triggers the same auto ability, if that auto ability then gets hit with Amaterasu, the Amaterasu damage is going to hit Gogo, right? We don't get to do any fun shenanigans where Amaterasu like reflects back to the original character. No. This is still, it's Gogo's auto ability. He's just copying somebody else's. Actually, now that I think of it, no, Kimari, Opus 1 Kimari with the Ronso Rage is the other card that can copy an opponent's ability, but it copies special abilities, not auto. So I guess that's the difference there for why they're doing so much clarification here. Anyway, so that's the second one. The third one is the auto ability triggered using Gogo's auto ability is placed on the stack after Gogo's ability has been resolved. This is more straightforward. This is what I've been saying throughout a lot of this video, which is that, again, what are our 4 things that happen when an auto ability goes on the stack? We select from multiple actions, we choose from different targets, we assign effects to different targets, and we assign values to different targets. Gogo copying the ability is none of those 4 things. So what it's saying is that when Gogo enters the field, you choose the target, you choose the auto ability, but then nothing else happens, right? The auto ability is just sitting there. And then when it resolving triggers the auto ability, the copy of the auto ability. So yeah, they're just saying that, like, don't get ahead of yourself. This first ability has to resolve before you even do the copying. Copying doesn't happen when the auto ability first enters the stack. And the last bit is, if the effect selected has been rendered invalid before the auto ability is triggered, then the auto ability will not trigger. This is a messy sentence. I'm going to tell you. This is one of those that I stared at for a while before I probably needed to go speak to a psychic to figure out exactly what they meant, but I didn't have to. I guess I figured it out on my own without the psychic. What they're saying is that you're probably familiar, hopefully, with the rules around choosing targets, and that if you choose a target and then when the ability resolves, if that target is no longer valid, then the whole ability gets canceled. We're familiar with that. What we're not familiar with as much is that we don't have a lot of effects that choose abilities. We have some, right? But not a lot of them. Not compared to what chooses characters. We don't have a lot of them that choose abilities. And so what this is saying is that, let's say your opponent played Warrior of Light, and then you play Gogo and you choose Warrior of Light's ability. Okay? What's happening is that if for some reason, this is a weird play, not a very good play in most situations, but let's say that then the opponent plays, I don't know, they do Ject Block and they cancel their own Warrior of Light auto. Again, stupid play strategically, but I'm going to use it for rules describing purposes. Ject Block chooses their own Warrior of Light ability, says to cancel it. All right. Ject Block resolves. It cancels the Warrior of Light auto ability. Now we go to resolve Gogo's auto ability, and Gogo's auto ability chose that auto ability that's no longer there. It's no longer a valid target, which means that now Gogo's ability also gets canceled. Now, again, you're probably asking, well, wait, if we were using Ject Block, why wouldn't we just also choose Gogo's ability anyway, just cancel everything? Because I didn't think this through when I chose Ject Block. I was going to say Amaterasu, and I'm like, no, choose something that's more fun than Amaterasu. Let's choose Ject Block. And here we are. But anyway, the overall point is that if the auto ability is no longer on the stack, when we go to resolve Gogo's auto ability, you don't have a valid target anymore. Your target was the auto ability. And so now, because that auto ability is gone, Gogo's auto ability will not trigger the same auto ability. So this last entry is just so complicated because it's just so vague with, like, it doesn't point out enough of which auto ability it's talking about. Like, again, if you read it literally, if the effect selected has been rendered invalid before the auto ability is triggered, then the auto ability will not trigger. Yeah, but anyway, that's what it means. We're just talking about the rule that we are used to with characters about things being canceled. Moving along. Mog 6. This is a when you do so. Do the auto ability. Resolve it. Generate second auto ability. Put it on the stack. Done. Cecil. All right. Cecil's entry says the minus modifier to power values is decided at the point when effects are resolved, so it is not possible for the opponent to interrupt after confirming what the altered value is. This fits in with a bunch of the other ones that we've had throughout this, talking about things where something is selected, named, chosen, decided during the resolution of an ability, and it all comes down to the idea that that once you've started resolving an effect, you have to resolve it completely. Even if resolving an effect causes damage that results in an X burst, even in that situation, the X burst still has to wait for the effect to resolve before you resolve the X burst. It's weird, but that's how it works. So an effect cannot be interrupted. So what they're saying here, I should read the ability, I guess. It says choose one forward other than Cecil. Until the end of the turn, Cecil and the chosen forward lose power of any value less than Cecil's power. Units must be 1,000. It says you can only use this ability. That the part doesn't matter. So you're choosing a value of power and then reducing both Cecil and the chosen forward by that value. So they're just pointing out that choosing that value of power happens on resolution, and then the rest of the resolution is reducing that number of power. So there's no gap of time between choosing the amount of power and actually resolving it. So your opponent can't be like, oh, you're reducing by 5,000. Well, then I'm going to play this thing to do this, right? Nope. No option. No window there for that. Jack Garland. Okay. I'm going to read Jack's stuff here because it'll make more sense talking about this. So Jack has 4 abilities. First one we don't care about. Second one is an auto ability. It says when Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job. Third ability is a field ability that says Jack Garland cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities of characters with the name job. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Fourth ability is an auto ability that says at the end of each of your turns, choose 1 forward with the name job and remove it from the game. Now, I'm going to swing back for a second here because you probably thought that Jack Garland's second ability and third ability were all the same ability, right? It would make sense for it to say when Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job, and then as part of the same effect, Jack Garland cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities of characters with the named job. But they're not the same ability. They are 2 separate abilities, and it's not easy to tell because they're on separate lines. But they're on separate lines where the line before it goes mostly to the end of the line. But if you're going to argue with me about this and say no, clearly they're the same ability, I'm going to use what they've written here to show you that they're actually separate abilities. So the first entry says a job is named at the point when effects are resolved, so it is not possible to interrupt with a summoner ability after a job has been named. Okay, this is not really what I was talking about, so I'll come back to what I was talking about. But this is the same thing we were just talking about with Cecil, the thing we were talking about with Xande with choosing a job, the thing we were talking about with Hashmal with choosing a job or a category. I'm not going to reiterate it because you can look at any of those if you want the more detailed description, but in resolving it, you name the thing and then the effect happens. There's no window there. But the second bit here says the named job referred to by this card's field ability, and the second auto ability is the job named when using the first auto ability. So they're calling out that Jack Garland has 2 different auto abilities and a field ability. Well, they don't say how many field abilities, but he has 2. But they mentioned he's got 2 different auto abilities. So the auto abilities, the first one is the when Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job. The second one is the at the end of each of your turns. But the fact they mention it's referred to by this card's field ability, well, they can't be talking about the Jack Garland is also a card named Garland in all situations. We're not referring to that field ability. So we're talking about when Jack Garland, or we're talking about, the third line here. Whew, this is what happens when I've been doing this for an hour and a half. We're talking about the Jack Garland cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities of characters with the name job. That's a field ability. That's what they're talking about. Yes. So the name job referred to by this card's field ability. They're talking about the third and fourth lines there as a field ability. So because that's a field ability, that means that the auto ability above it is just 1 line. When Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job. And that makes it probably one of my favorite auto abilities in the whole game now, because it by itself in a vacuum, it does nothing. When Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job. That's the entire effect. Like if he leaves the field before this resolves, you can name 1 job. Pictomancer. I don't know, whatever. But it's just funny because it doesn't do anything by itself. So anyway, my delirious ramblings aside, the importance of this is because they're talking about named job, and named job is not a phrase that we've seen on any cards before, right? So this is just it's a unique situation where we have 1 ability on the job is deciding something. Sorry, 1 ability on the job. 1 ability on the card is deciding something. And then other abilities on the card are referencing what you decided for that from that other ability. So they have to use the phrase named job here. Now, that does mean, by the way, when Jack Garland enters the field, if your opponent Amaterasu's the first auto ability, you don't get to name a job. And then now the rest of the abilities don't do anything because it's a null value, right? Because there wasn't a named job, so now they don't do anything. But yeah, so Jack Garland, very interesting card, very interesting kind of new design space, I guess. Excuse me, but yeah. When Jack Garland enters the field, name 1 job. On to Snovlinka. So she's got 2 possible actions for her auto ability, and depending on the situation, you might only get to select 1 of them, or you might get to select up to 2. Her 2 actions. The first one is Snovlinka gains haste and the ability, if Snovlinka deals damage to your opponent or a forward, double the damage instead. This effect does not end at the end of the turn. Then the second action is choose one forward, deal 8,000 damage. Second action is pretty straightforward. So their first entry here says, if 2 effects are selected, then the 8,000 damage inflicted on a forward is doubled. Now what they're clarifying here is if you're in a situation where you get to select both options, when you are selecting from multiple, actually, even without selecting from multiple actions, you always resolve a card in the order it's written. But this also includes when you select from multiple actions. So if you have multiple actions and you do, make your choices from that, then you resolve from top to bottom. So because of that, when you are resolving this auto ability, you will choose the target before it resolves, but then when you go to resolve it, you resolve the first auto first, or sorry, the first action first, which gives her haste, and it gives her that ability that doubles the damage. Then you resolve the part that deals the damage. And since you resolve the part that deals the damage after you resolve the first part, she has that field ability now that doubles the damage. So just pointing out that you will deal 16,000 damage to something if both actions were selected. And then second bit here, if 2 effects are selected and the forward chosen as a target has become an invalid target at the point when effects are resolved, Snovlinka will not gain the effects of having haste and inflicting double damage. This touches back on what I was talking about with Seymour, which is, again, the rule that exists broadly, where if an effect chooses one or more targets, and then when you go to resolve it, all of the targets that it chose are invalid, then the entire effect is canceled. So if you do choose or select both those effects and you choose a forward to deal 8,000 damage, if that forward is now not able to be chosen by summons or abilities, or if it left the field, then or just invalid for any other reason, maybe opponent no longer controls it, I don't know, then that means the entire thing gets canceled, which includes the gaining haste and the field ability. So it's all lumped together. Whenever we have multiple actions like that you're putting together, it's the Build-A-Bear of effects, right? You just end up, it's all one unit when it's all said and done. All right, we're almost there. We're in the final stretch. Firion. If no backup cards have been chosen, then it is not possible to look at cards in your deck. So Firion has, when you enter the field, choose up to 3 fire backups and or wind backups. Activate them, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 card among them to your hand, and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. This goes back to Seymour again, talking about that when you have choose up to, it is valid to choose 0 targets, right? You up to 3 means that you can choose 0, 1, 2, or 3 targets. But if you intentionally choose 0 targets, then what happens is the auto ability just gets removed from the stack immediately, even before anybody gets priority. So essentially it cancels the whole auto. So if you intentionally choose 0 backups when you play Firion, then they're just saying that you don't get to do any of the rest of it. You don't get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You don't get to add anything to your hand. You do not pass go. Do not collect $200. All right, and our final entry here, Terra. So this one is easy because it's a when you do so. In fact, I think it specifies for both abilities. Both their abilities are when you do so's. So since this is the last one, I'll be a little less shorthanded about it. When the auto ability goes on the stack, you put it on the stack, and then when it resolves, as long as you did the thing, is when you do so, which in this case for her ability is either paying lightning or paying a fire. After you pay that, now you've generated a second auto ability. That auto ability goes on the stack, and in the case of her first one here, it's when you do so, choose 1 forward, break it. So you would place that onto the stack, you would choose forward, now you have a second auto, and then when that resolves, you break it. So it's an auto ability that when it resolves generates a second auto ability. So that doesn't mean that there's a window of time between those 2 things resolving. It does mean that your opponent can cancel it after you've done the first half of it, things like that. But that's all of them. I did it, and just barely under the amount of time it took me last time. Actually, by the time I finish my wrap up here, it'll probably be about the same amount of time. So the last fact checking that I did was 1 hour and 40 minutes. And as we sit right now, it's 1 hour and 39 minutes. So thank you for sitting through all that with me and my ramblings and stuff. I hope it was educational. I hope it was entertaining. And that you came away with that learning some stuff you didn't know before. There's a wide variety of things that came up with those cards, and especially some really obscure stuff that hasn't come up very often. So, other than the green ones, which I always kind of just don't care too much about, the rest of them are all very valuable things to either learn or be reminded of. Not just for the cards themselves, but just to know broadly, because then when you see similar effects in the future, you'll know the ruling overall. And of course, that's just a big part of my philosophy when it comes to teaching the rules and talking about the rules, is that I like to do it in a way that talks about the rules broadly, so that we're not narrowing it down to this is how this card works, but by going, this card is an example of this rule that just works universally whenever we see this same effect come up. So that way you can apply it elsewhere to cards that already exist, the cards that don't exist yet. Hopefully we're ingraining the concepts and not getting too locked in on the specific cards, but like what the types of abilities and effects and rule situations that come up from them are. So yeah, thank you for watching. I don't have the normal end card thing like with the rules roundup here, but of course you can find me at all the places. You can find me you're here on YouTube watching me, where I'm at Judge Jared, so you can check out all the videos here. You can subscribe to me, you can like the videos, you can subscribing is cool. I'm creeping closer to 300, and I can't do that without your help. On Facebook, you can find me facebook.com/Judge Jared. On Discord, my user ID there is Judge Jared. My DMs are open if you want to ask any rules questions or just say hi. And then on Twitter, I am at Judge Jared FFTCG. Don't do much tweeting there unless I'm asking questions to Hobby Japan. But if you want to see what questions I'm asking Hobby Japan, or just say hi there or follow me, whatever, then you can do that as well. So those are the 4 places you can find me. Yeah, thank you for watching through all of this. I will see you in the next one, because it's going to be less than a month, hopefully, if they're on time, less than a month before we have the next one of these. But yeah, I'm Judge Jared. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, court is adjourned.